So Barou Shoei is by far one of the most fascinating players in Blue Lock. Him being a fan favorite is honestly no surprise at all. Barou is fascinating because he doesn't simply rely on his natural born talent or his natural born physique. Instead, we see him constantly working to improve himself and reevaluating his play and growing from his mistakes. We see that he's very disciplined, not only on the field but outside the field as well. And lastly, and most importantly, he is the epitome of the philosophy of Blue Lock. He is extremely egotistical. He relies on his own abilities and always sees himself as the king of the field. He doesn't just hope that somebody else can magically carry him, instead he bends the field to his will. And as the series goes on, he becomes more pragmatic in terms of his strategy. Like I said, he reflects and gets better. In the beginning of the series, we saw that he always simply assumed the ball was going to be on his feet. He assumed the teams were going to play around him, and he was always going to get his way. But once he met Isagi, he realizes that once he starts playing with more talented strikers, they're not just going to simply give him the ball and give in to him. He needs to find more strategic ways to force the game to bend to his will regardless. For starters, we see that he develops Predator Eye, an ability that allows him to simply wait for the best time to strike, and this allows him to continue playing his way without him having the ball on his feet every waking second, which helps a lot when playing with other egotistical strikers. However, and this may be the controversial part of the video, Barou represents all the negatives of ego. Statistically, his performances do not really lead to victory that often. Additionally, his success seems to come more from catching the opposing team off guard than him actually being able to outmaneuver them. He plays in a fashion that simply isn't sustainable unless he has one of two conditions. One, completely, like I said, catches the opposing team off guard, or two, has the team completely structured around him. Now, before I start delving into each of these individual points, I also want to say that Barou isn't a gimmick either. All these strategies only work because he has a lot of talent to back it up. If you put Naruhaya, for example, in this position, I promise he won't have nearly the same result. My first point is how he demonstrates the negative aspects of ego. First things first, I feel like a lot of people misunderstand ego's philosophy, at least to a small degree. Ego is talking to a country that has zero semblance of individuality, at least from his point of view. My point is, Jinpachi probably finds it unlikely that any of these players from Japan will go way over the edge in terms of ego. I'm sure if Jinpachi was on the western side of the world, like in Brazil or the United States, I promise you he cannot give this advice to anybody in the US because they'll go full crackhead. Jinpachi is simply adding the aspect of ego as more like the missing piece. That's why he loves someone like Isagi, for example. In his head, Isagi is the perfect example of this. He knows ego is the last missing piece for him and frankly a lot of people in Japan, but aside from that, they're still nonetheless very pragmatic about it. It is undoubtable that people like him, Karasu, and Hitoshi Rin are very egotistical, but they could still play in a team setting and still be smart about it. The ego that they needed was the part about where sometimes the team kind of has no choice but to rely on someone to carry, or how they need to shoulder the responsibility so they don't run away from challenges. However, Barou got this mindset and just went full megalomaniac with it. And again, to some degree, I kinda see why it's respectable. And this leads to one moment between the match between Ubers and Bass and Munchin that a lot of people really enjoy, but I feel like its applications are questionable to say the least. At one point, Barou completely rejects Snuffy's idea of teamwork, and ends up stating something along the lines of, if I'm going to lose, I want to lose within my own abilities, not relying on somebody else. And this sounds nice until you essentially realize that this only applies in individualistic settings. Let me paint a picture for you. Let's say you're on a flight and there you see a mountain range where a skilled pilot could theoretically fly the plane through the mountains. Instead of going around it and doing a safe route, instead he's like, and if I fail this challenge, I'ma fail with my own skill. And we see the results of this in his poor win ratio. Let's look at each selection, for example. In the first selection, his team had an abysmal 1-3 record. During the second selection, he actually loses his first 2 games and is luckily picked up by Isagi. He then proceeds to get absolutely owned by Isagi and honestly kind of carried by Isagi to the next victory, then proceeds to lose again, then wins the next 2. You then have his victory in the U20 game, and his Uber's team has a record of 2-2 in the Neo Egoist League. Now, let's break this down into 2 possible scores. If you look at the games in which he was involved in any capacity, he has a record of 7 wins and 8 losses. which gives him an abysmal 47% win rate, although if you don't want to count the first Ubers game where he didn't play, you can say 50%. But here is where it gets worse. If you count the games where Barou is undoubtedly the best player on the team, or the team revolves around him, he actually has an abysmal 3 wins and 6 losses, or in other words, 33% win rate. And what's frustrating is that you can argue some element of luck, because to be fair, that Team X seemed kinda hopeless. But let's look at the second selection. Barou scored 4 goals in his first game. If he had 1 assist, he obviously would have won that game. He could have been part of the first team that actually completed the second selection. Now, you can argue that it all kind of worked out in the end. He definitely grew a lot by playing with Isagi, but all that kind of happened through luck. He never planned to be on a team full of other competent strikers. After all, he picked Naruhaya for God's sake, mostly because he thought that he would at least listen to him blindly. But that is cheap and that's just not going to help him grow as a player, but his head was so far up his own ass that all he kept thinking was, as long as they do what I say, we will win. The ego is admirable, but that was a weakness that he had to learn the hard way. Now he definitely gets better when it comes to playing with other egotistical strikers, as we see later on, but that's kind of because the circumstance threw him there. He would normally never pick to play with any of these players. Now let's compare that to someone like Hitoshi Rin. After all, Rin didn't really seem to care about who he played with in the second selection. But 1, he didn't go out of his way to pick weak players that would likely listen to him. 2, he's Rin, and I'm sorry, Barou is not freaking. 3, he did get asked by the second and third best player. And 4, he will make the best use of his team through that puppeteer style that he has. Sorry, but Barou does not have any of these qualities. This is why originally I did not like the fact that Barou ended up joining Ubers, mostly because I feel like he threw away a lot of what he learned about how to play around other egotistical strikers. However, that's obviously temporary, since the U20 arc would force him to of course go back to learning how to play with other egotistical strikers, and it's nice to see how he would perform when given the full chance to be the top dog around competent players. And to be fair, in the NEL, he does have a 2-1 record, at least in the games that he played. But unless the team is around him, again, like I said, he just catches people off guard with his crazy egotistical style. This is why since the moment he lost to Isagi and Nagi, all the way up to the NEL, he's never been able to score more than 1 goal per game. It's always the same pattern. Barou does something completely unexpected, gets a point, and after that he becomes kind of fodder. Except ironically with his match against Chigiri, Kunigami, and Reo, where it was kind of the opposite. Towards the end of the match, Barou had actually passed the ball a few times to Isagi. This is why his chomp feints were so successful, because the team he was going up against genuinely had no idea whether or not he was going to pass the ball or shoot it. And that game also revealed that against players that already know how he's going to behave, he is not that difficult to shut down. But then we get to the second condition that you can meet, which is have a team completely calibrated around him just like the Ubers have it. And this has actually been pretty fun to watch. Think about it, a defensive team that wraps around a singular striker. Japan was actually known for being a good defensive team, but a team that lacked a striker. So the Ubers team is likely what Jinpachi Ego was initially envisioning when he created Blue Lock. Japan's admittedly good defense surrounded by a generational striker. This has changed quite a bit because he probably just didn't envision the program being so successful that there were so many different egotistical strikers that came out of it. Mind you, the program was initially created with the idea that 299 strikers were going to be eliminated. However, it seems like Ego was forced to recalibrate the program. The problem is, this is not going to work with the U20 team. For this to work, essentially Isagi would have to turn into Nanase, and Hitoshi Rin would have to turn into Hiyori-Yo. And like I said, once teams get a whiff of Barou's playstyle, this whole stealing the light kind of thing from Isagi is just not gonna work. In sports, there's such thing as system players. And Barou's one of those players who don't really fit into a system, they really are the system itself. Perfect example of somebody that is in Barou's shoes would be a player like Russell Westbrook. In his younger days, he was heavily criticized for being the reason why Oklahoma had lost because of his more individualistic playstyle. Now that is really debatable as to whether or not that's true or not, but that's not the point. The point is, when he had his own team in 2017 with the Oklahoma City Thunder, where he was the undisputed best player on the team, and the team pretty much did everything that he wanted them to do, he got individual awards, he got the All-Star team, he got first team All-NBA, and he got the League's MVP award. In fact, all of Russ's led teams never made out the first round of the playoffs. Then at one point he finds himself with the Lakers, And although he was very heavily scrutinized and gave a lot of unfair blame in my opinion, it doesn't change the fact that I highlighted the fact that if you're not putting a team around Westbrook, he's going to struggle. Even when playing next to Anthony Davis and LeBron James, it just wasn't working. This was because Russ does not know how to play off the ball. He does not know what to do when he's not the one leading the offense. Forgot which YouTuber said this, but essentially for Russell Westbrook to be successful in the Lakers, LeBron and AD would have to essentially play like role players around him, which they simply just aren't. And that's the issue with Barou. He's gonna have to play in a level that's so high that it is worth Jinpachi's ego saying that Isagi and Rin should just not even play or be forced to play as support pieces around him. So even if Barou does somehow become marginally better than both of them, it is not worth axing both of them because both of them can at least still pass the ball around and still is going to play with other teammates. He will always be relegated to the Joker trump card trope that he is coming off the bench like he was for the U20. However, this is looking even more unlikely considering that Shidao Ryusei is now going to be on the same team with them, and frankly he would just play as a better Joker than him. Now, I should make this clear, this is not a prediction. At the end of the day, it is just a show, and the show will always follow its own logic. I'm simply discussing how I believe logically a character like Barou would end up. But he's a fan favorite, so this is going to work out for him somehow. I just hope that he does go through some other growth and finds a way to fit in. Or, and there's another theory I have, Itoshi Sai as a midfielder kind of finds a way to make all the pieces of Blue Lock kind of come together. But we'll just have to wait and see. Alright guys, that's the end of the video. I just want to say thank you very much. I also want to give you guys a big thank you because my video I did on the anime trope that is killing Blue Lock did a lot better than I thought. By the time of recording, I think I have about 5 or 6k views, which I didn't ever think I'd get a video got that much views in 3 days. So just want to say a big thank you to you guys, and please subscribe though because I do want to hit that 1,000 so I can hopefully start monetizing this channel. Thanks guys, and have a wonderful day.